Hello, my creative friends. I'm Chris, one of the art instructors at the Lodge at Woodlock Destination Spa. I'm here today on video to help you exercise your creative side. So grab your art supplies and let's get started. Hello, all my creative people. Thank you for joining me. What I wanted to share with you today is some simple drawing techniques on something that is called Zentangle or Zendoodle. It's actually just an organized type of doodling, and it's actually really relaxing because it uses something I call creative focus, which allows you to concentrate very heavily on what you're creating, and it actually just helps you to relax. So what I wanted to show you today is a pattern called Paradox, and this is Paradox right here. And basically it's a series of lines inside a shape, and I have another version of it right here. It's a series of lines within a shape, and it can work in any shape. I have it in a square here. We're also going to create one in this little square on this paper here, and then we're going to do kind of like a paradox page where you're going to take the pattern and put it together with a whole bunch of different shapes, and it'll come out looking something like this. I know a lot of people don't have tons of different types of art supplies, so I thought simplicity was the best formula for this. You can do this with probably things you already have in your house, like a number 2 pencil, or any type of pencil, any kind of erasers. This is a detailed stick eraser, this is a gum eraser. You could also use any type of marking pen. I use micron pens. Any type of ballpoint type pen can be used. You can actually use a standard click ballpoint pen. It doesn't matter. You can do this with whatever you have in the house. I've got a couple of Sharpies here too. Here's like a standard Sharpie that you could probably use to make a larger one because the points aren't very thin. But there's also this type of Sharpie, if you happen to have one, where it has the thin on one side and then the standard on the other. So it doesn't matter, whatever you have, just grab what you have. And I have some drawing papers here. I have like a tan or a black and standard white, but again, it doesn't matter what you draw on. It doesn't have to be drawing paper. If all you have right now is some copy paper from your printer, go grab a piece of copy paper. You can do it on that. You don't need anything special to do this. You don't have to run to the store or buy anything in particular. So let's go over how this is done. And what I've done here is I basically just very loosely I did it with a ruler. I just made a little square on this piece of paper, and we're going to go over how to complete a paradox here. Initially, when you're first doing this, to be helpful to yourself, you can use a pencil to draw everything in and then go over the tops of your lines with your marker. Or if you feel confident enough and you have skills, then you can go right to the pen and do that instead if you wish. And note, there's no requirement at all for any previous art experience or any kind of art skills. Anybody can do this. And that's why I wanted to share this with you today, because we're all kind of cooped up in our houses with all this mess that's going on, so I figured this might be something that would help pass the time. And you can even get the kids involved with this too. It's not difficult to do. So I'm going to take this square, I'm just going to fill it in with my ink here. So again, any kind of a straight edge, doesn't matter what it is. I'll move this up here too. So I'm just going to come right here and I'm going to box this in. So this is basically the formula that you're going to be using when you create these. You'll create them in pencil first, and then once you get them the way you like it, to your liking, and you're satisfied with what you have, then you are just going to take whatever pen it is that you have and go over the top of your pencil lines. Okay. Just line up this last corner. Okay, so here's the formula. So I just went over this with, and I inked this in, I went over it with the pen. So now I'm just going to come in here with my eraser, and I have my clickable stick eraser, and I'm going to erase any pencil lines that don't belong. So after you put in your design, you will be doing the same thing. You're just going to come in here and you will erase out any pencil lines that are in there, so your finished drawing will be clean. So I'm going to start in this corner here, and again I'm going to draw a line out, and I'm going to offset it. And sometimes in the beginning when it's helpful, you can make a little mark on where you are aiming for, so you actually have a destination point. So I'm going to start in this corner here, and I'm going to draw out that line, and it doesn't matter if it's completely straight. I don't draw straight lines. I'm happy with whatever I get. So I'm going to draw out that straight line. I'm going to offset it from the corner just a little bit. Okay, so now what happens is each time you offset, this little space is your offset. The offset is what creates this twist, this like little vortex style shape that you get after you're completed, because each one of the lines that you're going to draw is going to have that offset. Okay, so after you draw in your first line, once you get to this point here where it ends, that is where you're going to start your next line going to the other corner. So where that ended right here, this is where I'm going to start the next one. So I'm going to start at that point and draw out another offset. And I try my best to make the offsets as close as possible, but don't worry about it. It's okay if it's not exactly the same. You still get the same effect. Okay, so now where I ended that line is where I'm going to start the next one. And I'll just draw that one out. And it actually ends up being like a really long triangle, a long skinny triangle. Okay, now you'll notice when I do this, I turn my paper each time I do it, and there's a reason I do that. As you start getting into the center, you can see as you go through here, this one I went counterclockwise, so you could actually get lost in here if you turn your attention away and look off somewhere else, or if someone talks to you or whatever. So at least if you turn your paper each time, you'll have some idea of where you were. So that's just a tip if you want to follow that. If not, that's okay. Do what works best for you. Alright, so I'm going to draw out this next one, and now this one is going to stop right at that first line that I drew. Okay, it's not going to continue on to the outer edge. Again, I'm going to draw out my next line. And I'm just going to continue on with this pattern until we run out of space in the center. If you wanted to use a ruler for this, you could. It's going to take you a lot longer, but you know, if you feel that you want that kind of perfection, that's okay. Then you can go ahead and do that. I don't feel it's necessary. First couple times you do it, you get over a little bit of a hurdle, and you actually create a rhythm drawing each one of these lines. So to me the ruler just gets in the way, but if you want to use one, that's fine, go right ahead. So now the offset pattern working your way into the center, creates this twist that we have here. So that's why I'm saying if you keep them about the same, the offsets, if you keep them about the same, you get a nice even twist. Sometimes it doesn't happen, and that's okay too. In my other example that I had here, they were a little bit different. These are a little bit thicker than some of these over here, and I ended up getting a little bit more of a rectangular twist in the center rather than a squared off twist like I have in this one here. So, but again, it doesn't matter how it comes out exactly. You'll always have a good result. Just take your time. And that's one of the things that I like to talk about with this is something I call creative focus. When you're doing this on your own and you just slow down and concentrate on each line that you put in here, it actually creates a sense of well-being. It's almost a meditation of sort. And it's why I do this. And it's why I teach this. I also teach at a very exclusive resort and spa locally here. And it's why I go and teach the classes there, because I want to share this with everyone. So you continue just working your way into the center. And you can see I have a little bit more of a rectangular shape than a square shape, because I do have some differences in my offsets. But again, that's okay. Just keep working your way into the center. And then once you get into the center, when it starts to tighten up, you don't necessarily have to turn it each time. I do until it gets fairly small. Okay. And I think that's about it. So now I'm actually just going to bounce to each side until we're all closed up in the center. And I'll just end it there. So that's the paradox. You get that little bit of a vortex in here, a nice little twist, and it creates 4 little sections. It almost looks like descending stairs. But that is paradox. And like I was saying, this works in any shape. So in order to do something like this, I mean, I'm zoomed in here, but all this is actually paradox in a series of different shapes. And when you put them next to one another, like I will start off in a corner, and you put another shape next to it and do paradox either in another clockwise position or counterclockwise, you get all these intertwining shapes. And it just really creates these really awesome patterns. And then you can either color them in or you can just shade them. I mean, I have this one here, it's just shaded in because, again, we're just working with pen and pencil. We're not really getting involved with color because I don't know if everybody has the ability to use color, so I'm keeping it very basic today. In future videos we'll get a little bit more elaborate, but because of the situation that we're all in at the moment, I figured basic would be the way to go. So taking this right here, we're going to start off on this larger paper with, we'll put this design in one corner and then we'll work our way out, playing around with other different shapes next to it. So over here in this corner, I'm just going to take my pen, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a square. It can be whatever I come up with. So it could be something like this. Okay, so then what you're going to do is you're just going to pick any one of these corners. It doesn't matter. Let's start over here. Let's start right in this point here. And then I'm going to come in here and draw that offset like I was doing in my square in the previous drawing. So there's the shape we have in the corner. So now what you can do is in this little space over here, you can do another shape, or you can pull something off in this corner here. So let's do one across here, one down this way, and then one back to our outside edge. So now we actually have a 5-sided object. So you can, again, you can pick any corner, so we can start here. So now you can see we have this little design going on here in the center, kind of like another vortex, different styled vortex, like a column. And when you put these up against one another, and sometimes you can change direction, like here I'm still going clockwise like I did on the first one, but if you put another shape next to it and go counterclockwise, you end up with a totally different shape. We'll do that for the next one. Okay, so now you can see the shapes, how they start to interact with one another. So over here, let's just do a triangle here. So I'm just going to draw a single line. And again, don't be worried about your lines not being perfectly straight, because there is not a straight line in this whole drawing right here. But when you look at it overall, you know, that goes away. You don't really notice the imperfections because you're looking at it as a whole. So don't get hung up on that. Just keep moving forward. Alright, so this one we're going to go counterclockwise. Okay, so I'm going to start over here at this point of the triangle, and I'm going to draw out my line in this direction. Alright, so now we only have 3 sides. I'm going to be a little bit more conscious of my spacing on this one, only because the 3 sides, I want it to come out a specific way. You're going to see this little pattern right in here. It's going to create a sweep through here. So I want it to stand out a little bit. Just take your time. Take your time and have fun with it. Alright, so now here's this other shape that you'll end up seeing repeatedly, you know, once you start combining these all together. Alright, so let's do another one over here. So we have another triangle. Well, it's actually not a triangle. We actually have another little flat spot right there. So I'm going to work clockwise on this one. Let's see what we get. Don't know if this suggestion would be helpful or not, but when I watch videos where I'm trying to learn something, what I do is I watch the video all the way through once, and then I'll draw along with the instructor after watching the whole video. I'll do it with the instructor the second time, and then I will pause the video wherever I need to. And I think that's one of the great advantages of doing things on video, is the person who's observing and watching the video has the opportunity to stop it and rewind and review what was said or done as many times as they need to until they understand the process. So I always found that very helpful. Alright, so there's our fourth one. So you can see how all these shapes now are starting to interplay with one another. So basically what I do at this point is I'll just come through and I'll look at another area where I might want to put in another shape. I mean, this obviously seems like it would be another triangle, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. So maybe up here, I'll come out and I'll draw 2 lines and create kind of like a almost trapezoidal shape. And I'm going to work counterclockwise on this one. And when you do this, I tend to work away from myself. Some people might be more comfortable working towards themselves, like this. So if that suits you better, try that. I'm going to give it a try, because I usually work away from myself. But try different methods when you're learning something new. You know, don't just stick with one thing. Try different methods and you might find out something that works better for you over time, rather than following the same method each time. Especially if it's giving you trouble, you definitely want to try something different. Okay, so we have this one in here now. So now we can see how we have a little bit of an up sweep, a down sweep, and then it comes back up again. So what can we do here? All right, let's do a line coming across here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to split the shape, because that's really a long distance. I don't want to go that long with my lines. You can if you want to. I just prefer not to do that. So what I think I'm going to do here is split this sort of in half on an angle. And that's going to give me a sort of parallelogram and another trapezoid right in here. So now I have 2 shapes that I can work with. And I'm going to come in here, I'm going to work clockwise on this one. The next shape, I'm going to show you another option you have. Sometimes folks get upset that they can't draw a fairly straight line. So another option you have is to actually put a little bit of a curve to the line. All right, so we got a nice little twist going on in here, and another interaction with this shape over here, creating another one of these columns like we had in our first 2. So we have a column coming on here. Okay, so what I'm going to do with this one, I'm going to show you what I mean about putting a little bit of curve to the line. Counterclockwise on this one. So I'm going to put a little bit of curve. So here's what I mean. So I'm going to just extend it out a little bit and give it the slightest curve. So even though these lines are a little bit curved more than the other ones, it still works in there just fine. So If that works better for you, if you like that result better than trying to draw the straight lines, I mean, you can see I have some squiggly lines in there, but it's okay. Because when you look at it overall, you don't see that anyway. So it works out just fine. So let's do one more, and then we'll touch on some shading, because for me to finish the whole thing, it basically will take a lot more time than I'm sure you want to spend watching me do this. So we'll just do a section of this. We'll touch on some shading, and then you guys can get to it. So here's what we're working with. So now when I look at these, I look at it as what portion of these objects are closer to me as opposed to what portion of the objects are further away from me. And that's how I decide where I'm going to shade something. Let's take a look at this real quick. So in this area here, the way I viewed it in my mind was this area here is closer to me and obviously catching a little bit more light than the edge that's actually going around. I want this to look a little bit sort of to have a rounded shape or a cylindrical shape, if you will. So this edge right in here is where I'll put my darkest portion of pencil. And as I work my way out, it just gradually gets lighter until there's no pencil at all. So I look at these shapes and I say, all right, which one is closer to me and which one is like going back and going away from me. So that's where I know my shadows, my darkest shadows are going to be. All right, so let's do the same thing here. So I'm going to grab my number 2 pencil, and when I blend these the shadows in here, I use something called a blending stump. Now, not everybody has one of these, but you can use a piece of paper towel. You can like knot up a piece of paper towel. You can use your finger, your pinky, whatever you want. That's what we used to use years ago, before we knew that blending stumps existed. So you're going to come in here and you're going to decide where the shape is going to have the deepest recess. So in this little area right here, let's say, I'm going to choose this area on this side as my recess. So I'm just going to come in here with my number 2. And basically all I'm doing here is I'm just using the side rather than the point. I'm putting a little bit more of the point, not the point, the side of the pencil down on the paper, as opposed to the point, I should say. And I'm going to make that area fairly dark, but I'm only going to do this little stripe right here. I'll come back in and rework it a little bit after, but so let's say I'm going to use my finger to create this gradient. So you just kind of take your finger and tap along that edge, and what you're doing is you're pulling that graphite along the edge and creating a transition. Okay, now if I was to use the blending stump, I would do the same thing. I would come in here and work it along the edge and then pull in one direction towards the outside. And then that creates the dark to light transition again. And you can bring this out as far as you want to. Okay, I mean, this obviously works a little bit better than your finger, but if your finger is all you have, that's fine too. You can use a tissue if you don't want to get your fingers all messed up, and you can kind of take your pencil, the eraser portion, put the tissue in there like that, like this, and you can use the tissue as a blending stump instead. And then you don't get it on your fingers, so that's another option you have. Tissue, paper towel, doesn't matter. And if you get any of it in an area where it's not supposed to be, you just come in with your eraser and clean it up. Just like that. Okay, so let's do a couple of sections. So if that's my recess here, I would feel that this would be a recess in here as well. So I'm going to follow through and put it in where I think it should go. And again, you know, this is a personal choice. If you want it to be somewhere, put it in there. Make it look the way you want it to. This is your drawing, nobody else's. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll go around and I'll lay in all the areas that I want shadow first, and then I'll blend it all at once. So that'll be my second area. This area right here, I'm going to put some shadow in here. And they don't necessarily have to be all the same degree of darkness. You can have them vary. It's totally up to you. Because we're not really worrying about light source or light direction at this point. I mean, we're just coming in here and shading to separate pieces, create a little bit of depth and dimension. So it doesn't necessarily have to make sense with something like this. I mean, if you were doing a still life, that's one thing, but you know, this is just to have a little fun. So another technique you can use if you don't want to blend with, if you don't have a blending tool or you don't want to use the pencil or anything that I showed you, is your darkest area, you just put the greatest amount of pressure on the pencil there, and as you work your way out, you just reduce your pressure. So right about now, I'm still touching the paper, but I'm barely touching it at all. I'm just barely scraping the pencil on the paper, so it's putting something down. And then as I move back towards this edge, I'm just going to add a little bit more pressure. And then you can layer in how much of this graphite you want to get in there. You know, so each time you go over the top, you're putting in another small layer. So as you work your way out, you're just going to put less graphite on the paper, and then that will help you create that transition you're looking for. So you really technically do not have to blend that at all if you don't want to. Alright, let's see where else we're going to have some shadow, probably right under here. Sometimes the drawing itself will tell you where the shadows are supposed to go, especially if we're not actually following light direction. If we're just basically doing this to enhance what we have. Okay. So if you're going to be using something like this or one of the other tools, you just come into this edge right here where it's the darkest, work that in first, and then as you come out, again, lighten up on your strokes and just drag some of that graphite across the paper in increments. Do it in increments. What happens too is your stump gathers graphite on the tip of it. So if you wanted to do an area that's not as dense or dark with the graphite, you could actually just take this and use it like, you know, like the pencil. Just come in here and draw it in because there's graphite on here already. So let's say we don't want this area to be as dark, we want it to be somewhat subtle. So you can just come in here and draw that in. And you can see it's much lighter than it is over here. So if you need subtlety, that's an option. You can also, on another piece of paper, take this, take your pencil and create a little bit of a swatch of the graphite. Okay. And then again, using your pinky, pick some of it up and come in here and just use your pinky to put it in. It's not as accurate, but you can still get it in there if that's all you have. You'll still be able to enhance your work a little bit, and wherever it goes where you don't want it, you just come back in with your eraser and take it out. So you can use the swatch method as well. Also with your blending stump, you just come over here and just pick up more of the graphite and get it on there real good, and then come over to your drawing and decide where it's going to go. Let's say we'll put some in over here. So that would be the approach if you were just looking for a little bit of subtle shadows, nothing really dense and dark. And you can just layer this in until you achieve the tones that you're looking for. Okay. So going back to the pencil method, I'm trying to show you different ways to do this so it would apply to what you have available to you. So going back to the pencil method, if I actually wanted to make this darker, you could do that part first with your finger or the stump if you have one, and then just come back in and enhance it with the pencil and create a little bit more of a dark area and a little bit more of a transition between the two tones. Same over here. Just touch it up a little bit. Just work it. Another shadowing technique is something called crosshatch. So let's say I have this area in here. You can do strokes. I'm going in one direction. I'm pushing down and pulling towards myself. So I'm going in one direction with the strokes. And they're wide strokes because I have some of the pencil worn down, so it's not exactly a point, but it still works. Because cross-hatching is basically strokes in one direction and then strokes overlapping going in an opposite direction, whether it's perpendicular, on an angle. You can do it any number of ways, and you can keep overlapping and overlapping areas to create different levels of darkness or lightness. So that's an actual crosshatch using the point. But here, I forget where I was. Oh, here we are. So here I'm going in one direction with the broad side of the point, and then I can just come back in with the same broad side, just go in the opposite direction. So you can see how it's actually crossing over and creating a crosshatch, but it's just not as fine a line, so it still works. And then as you come out and make your stroke, lift the pencil away from the paper, and then to create that dark to light transition, so it looks like it's gradual. Just make the strokes a little further apart. So now I'm going to come back in the opposite direction. Okay, so you can see how this actually looks fairly similar to this, just using a different technique. So again, once you get into this area here, if you want to, you can take your finger or your stump or whatever you want, or whatever you have available to you, and then just gently rub over that area towards the edge, and you can see it blended it in, and it created a little bit more of a transition. And then in the area that you want, if you want it a little bit darker, just come back in and work it and make it a little bit darker. So that's like your deepest area of recess back there. So you want that to be the darkest. So that's the way you shade these. And you can take this as far as you want to. You can get really elaborate with your shading, as far as doing each one of these as an individual element, or treating it as I am, where they're actually little sections that are some are in front and some are in back. So however you want to approach it is totally up to you. And no matter what approach you use, it's going to come out really awesome. I know that. You just have to put in the time. And time is something we all have a little bit more of at the moment, so we might as well take advantage of it. Okay, so that's a little bit more of a crosshatch there, and then you can just tap at it with your finger and create a nice soft edge just using your finger. So you don't necessarily need one of these like I was saying earlier. Okay, so if there are areas that you want really dark, you can come back in with any one of your drawing pens that you're using, and you can fill it in, make it completely black. Fill in areas or fill in sections. Doesn't matter, whatever you want to do. However you want to approach it. You can create a whole page of just paradox and create these really awesome looking designs. I don't necessarily finish everything in one sitting. You don't have to, so don't feel that you have to. If you want to definitely finish something in one sitting, then just work on a smaller piece of paper or in a square. If you don't have the time to put into it, but you can work on this for a little while, put in your whole design, and then spend a couple of days, whenever you have some free time, come in and just work on your shading. And the more practice you put in with your understanding where shadows need to go and changing different levels of shadowing, you'll actually get very good at it. By the time you finish something this size, by the time you get to the end, you're going to be very, very proficient. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you do, or if you have any questions, please put them down below. I will answer you as best as I can, as quickly as possible. And I hope to see you the next time. So go get your pencils, get busy, and have some fun.